Yeah, Eugene.
So if you can't make the grass grow before, is there a way to make the grass grow?
So if you can't make the grass grow by pulling it, is there a way to make the grass grow? So there are a couple of things. Let's just look at this in an everyday sort of a way, and then we'll make it a bit more philosophical or religious, perhaps. Let's say you live in this house, and you've lived in it for about 20 years, and every time you look out the window to your front yard, it's just dirt. Once in a while, weeds grow, and your kids step on it, and they're thorns, and they come home crying. It just looks ugly. You look at your neighbors' houses, and they're kind of nice and clean and beautiful. Yours, of course. And then you want to say, you want to make some changes. You go to your wife or your husband and you say, well, what should we do to this place? I want to kind of beautify it, because every time I look at it, I see my own reflection and I don't like it. And she says, well, maybe we can plant some trees. You say, no, maybe we can put some grass down. Okay. Well, it's a land that hasn't been tilled for 20, 30, 40 years perhaps, uncared for. It's kind of been looked at as something irrelevant. And so you try to get an axe or a shovel and go to it yourself. And depending on the square footage of the front yard, if it's the size of this table, you say, yeah, you can do it yourself. If on the other hand, it's twice the size of this classroom, you realize physically you just can't do it. And you're not proficient, you don't really know what needs to be done. So you call someone and you say, can you put some grass in here? So sure. And you assume that, someone just needs to go to Home Depot, grab some stuff and bring it to your place and just put it down. Well, first you have to till the ground. You need to get a tiller from Home Depot that's about $200 a day. And you have to go at least 6 inches deep. Some people go 12 inches, you go 6 inches. And you say, okay, it's time to put the grass down. But no, you have to do the irrigation. And these are things you don't know. And then you got to get some stuff to make the irrigation come on and turn on and turn off automatically. And then the guy adds some stuff to the soil. And then he comes to you and says, okay, do you want us to plant seeds, or should we just get some sods from Home Depot? And you say, well, how much is the sod? And sod, I don't know if you know, it comes in the roll. They say, well, that's about $7 a piece. Well, how many pieces do I need? He says, well, you need 1,000. Well, how much are the seeds? $2. Okay. Now, remember, before even you can put the seeds down, your land has to be tilled, which means that if there are any pasts, any biases, any prejudices, any beliefs that you may have that contain a good amount of falsehoods, they need to just be removed completely. They're like weeds. They will eventually suffocate, the sod or even the seeds themselves. And let's say you go with the seeds and not the sod. He tapes off, marks off the, good morning, Nelson. The front yard, making sure that no one walks on it, because every time you walk on it, you kind of just destroy the potential of the seed coming to life. And you water it every day, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 times. And you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait. And then one day your wife just runs home screaming. And you're kind of scared. You say, "What happened?" "There is a blade of grass." It's like an acre land, and she's seen one blade coming up, and she's excited. Now, that's a very practical, real kind of episode that all of us in this class once in a while witness when we kind of drive by houses, maybe our own house. That all of us in this class are this pot of land filled with dirt and garbage and past experiences that we assume to be good, but they're actually not. We assume to be nourishing, but they actually are not. And we don't really take care of the stuff that are inside us. We don't really examine to see if they're poisonous, if they're actually beneficial to our growth, but no. And then one day we go somewhere and we ask someone, "Can you, for example, teach me what philosophy is?" Well, it's like someone saying, "I want my front yard to have grass in it." Well, before you can be given grass, before anything good can grow, you have to kind of till the ground, which means someone needs to kind of take interest in you, like you enough to spend time. It's really not spending time, it's sacrificing time and energy on the other person's part. And remember, if you ask someone to come to your house and put some seeds down, you're giving him about $10,000. If you want to have someone put philosophy inside you, for example, the person who does it doesn't gain anything. In fact, it's a complete loss most often, because you don't really value what's being planted inside you. And so what happens is not only does your imagination kind of trample on the seeds, but you also allow other people, you allow distractions, you allow the culture, you allow your past to all of a sudden walk in and destroy everything that's been planted inside you. Now, the problem with tilling is that it's painful. Now, this is a how-to culture. It's a culture in which people are not really designed to have patience at all. It's a quick fix for everything, everything. I don't know if you're familiar with these zombie movies. Like when the end of the world comes, especially in the West, everybody goes crazy. Now, it's not a bad idea for you to kind of go back to the culture of China, the culture of Japan, the culture of Middle East. They've had these apocalyptic moments for 5,000 years, every single day. And you don't see zombies around. So it says something to you about the way these other places, their lands have been tilled and they remain relatively intact. But in this culture, the people who live in this culture, the moment there is an unpleasant event, all of a sudden everything turns upside down and they need help. I have this student in one of my classes. She gives me like 4 lines for each audio. 4 lines. And then she says to me, "You're biased towards me." I'm saying, you're reading the Gospel of Joe. It's like 500 pages. And you give me 4 lines. What am I supposed to do with this? And then I am told that she's going to file a complaint. So you realize that anytime anyone feels a bit of friction, instead of internalizing it, self-examining it, no, none of those things happen. And so you just wait for the seeds to grow. You have parents, I have parents, all of us in this class have had parents, some of us are parents ourselves. And we tell our kids things, do they listen? No. It's something that I was talking to my wife about. She was saying that the kids don't listen, and the kids this, and the kids that. I said, listen, I remember when I was a kid. My parents sent me to India because I was such a brat. They sent me to America. They sent me to all over the place. Got me tutors, but I wasn't in the place. But they planted the seed, but someone else needs to walk into their life and kind of begin to water and give some light and some heat for the seed to grow. All really anyone can do for anybody. You plant the seed and you have no choice but to simply just walk away. That's how it is, especially as parents. And you hope that you ever seen the movie The Judge? Robert Downey Jr. and Robert Duvall. It's a beautiful movie. It's about this old man who's a judge in some small forsaken city. And of course, Robert Downey Jr. is a lawyer. He's taken after the footsteps of his father, and he lives in this big city, big house. And one day someone calls him and says, Dad is sick. And he goes to his courtroom, sits, and comes to realize his father is still as sharp as he's always been. And there's a moment, they're both standing in the living room, the mother has passed away. And he talks about the seeds, and I'm paraphrasing. It's a movie that you need to watch. It's actually quite good. And he talks about the seeds that he planted, and he was hoping that he can see the seeds blossom in his lifetime, but never did. And it's only when the father passes that he comes to understand a few things. So, it also depends, who plants, what kind of seed is growing inside you. I mean, the way this culture is, the viciousness of this culture is everyone has the seed of just being competitive, being vicious, being dominating, being aggressive. And you take that seed and you dump it in other people and other cultures, and there's no wonder why no one likes Americans. I'm not talking about this class, I'm just in general. Assalamu alaikum. Oftentimes, you don't really know what seeds have been planted inside you. And that is modern day capitalism. It's beautiful. You no longer need to take your military forces to Saudi Arabia. Take Ronaldo there, take Kim Kardashian there, take Miley Cyrus there, Britney Spears there, and before you know it, it's no longer Saudi Arabia. It just has a name, but the culture is now Western. Alex?
Somebody's got to make all that money. Okay. Kardashian.
Being prostitutes always been bad.
I'm sorry? It's actually a good profession if you know how to use it well.
Very hard to imagine.
With the, forgive me, there was a time where if you wanted to be the ruler of your country, you had to pay homage to the Catholic Church. Then as the Catholic Church began to lose its power, it had to honor the wishes of the ruler. And so there was this yo-yo syndrome that was taking place. And so what happens now is, for example, if you want gun control, for example, well, there is the military complex you need to study. There is the lobbyists you need to study. There is the politician's desire to be re-elected, which means that he needs the vote of his people. And so you realize it's no longer enough to simply tackle one thing to create justice. It's such a vicious web now that if you want, for example, to make some changes, you attack the politician. And the truth is, it's Bill Gates who's controlling this. It's Warren Buffett. It's Elon Musk. But I think for the most part, there is this thinking that's taking place that you need to kind of change the president. You need to change the politicians. And the truth is, that's not the case. I mean, these are all like, good morning, the people who take orders from those who are in the business of inventing, like Elon Musk, And so you have no idea who you're fighting and who you must fight.
For forgiveness rather than permission. I guess.
No, maybe just be like John Rambo. Just pack your stuff and move into a cave and make sure you don't see anything.
That actually brings up what I
Sure.
would ask about is solitude and
Solitude then?
solitude and depression,
Uh-huh.
and detracting from community or leaving the community to think. Do you think that is something? It seems to be a more Eastern value. The people here, they're not taught to do that. Like you said, everybody feels this immense pain. And, I don't know.
It's not really an Eastern thing, and let me explain why. I think you have in the entire, history of China, you have maybe 10 people, kind of like Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu and Confucius, who said, you know what, I'm just going to walk away from everything and figure out who and what I am. Because when you go to Eastern, Near Eastern cultures, Middle Eastern cultures, what you discover is people are profoundly communal, they're tribal. Even Japan, despite all of its technological advances, they're very, very tribal people, So what you have is that you have this exotic philosophy being exported. And it's usually kind of exported by Westerners who go there, or Westerners who read some book on Buddhism or some Sufism, where this guy like walks away from their family, sits in a cave for thousands of years, and ultimately becomes enlightened, and they preach attachment is bad. And so as a Westerner, you read the book and you say, well, that's the way to live. You know what? I'm going to divorce my family. I'm going to walk away from my job, my friends, find a cave somewhere in Yosemite or Shasta, and just sit there, completely quiet and without the presence of anyone. That's not the way we function, and that's not the way we should function. I'm not the Buddha, and I'm not going to fall victim to a piece of advertisement written by someone. I think what the Buddha did was very cruel, and I don't know if the story is true, but that when he kind of began to understand the meaning of life and what lives inside the belly of life, he said, you know what, I don't want to make my teachings public. It's not good for people. It's no different than your son coming to you saying, Dad, what's pornography? Well, you have to be an idiot to sit your 2-year-old down and completely, unpack this particular activity. Since human beings, for the most part, are social animals, solitude is something that goes against the flow of life. Reflection also goes against the flow of life, because reflection is much different than thinking. Thinking is you see something out there and you want to figure out what it is and how it functions. Reflection is you internalize an experience, you break it open, and it's as if you've really just gone into a cave. You can't hear anything out there, you can't see anything out there. You're very self-involved, like you become a narcissist. It's all about you. But this particular narcissism is actually quite healthy and beneficial, because you have this deep, intense need to understand something. And you have come to a place where your desire to understand something is not rooted in going to libraries and read books. Reflection is like your intestines. It's like 10 miles long. You drink a cup of coffee, it has to journey from Egypt to Jerusalem. And then what you have is this, your body has this ability to kind of take what's good and trash what's bad. That is what reflection is, and I don't know who has it. I don't know how people are taught. I don't think it's really something that you can be taught. You can modify various aspects of yourself, but for the most part, I think it's a gift that not very many people have.
And it's different from meditation or prayer in the sense reflection is it's active. You're calling it an active, putting yourself, your ego into the experience and reflecting on it that way, rather than just sitting with something.
I think there is this desire for complete quietness for all of us once in a while. You want to call that meditation, you can. I follow the footsteps of Krishnamurti in the way that reflection, observing, examining, understanding things can be the best form of meditation you'll ever experience. Because you're so intensely focused. And the nice thing about reflection, if you do it the right way, is it's something that you yourself will have discovered. Now, it doesn't mean that Jesus didn't say that. It doesn't mean that Socrates didn't say that. But it's something that you have reached with your own blood and sweat. And no one can take away. You know, it's Confucius kind of spoke about this also, that, you know, knowledge, people can take it away from you. You know, you read algebra or you get to know algebra and you say, oh, okay, I know math, but then comes calculus. And you realize, oh, you're really incompetent. Wisdom, on the other hand, is something that, it's a journey that you yourself have to take. It's like the seed is inside you. And through the act of reflection, you keep nourishing it, you keep protecting it, respecting it, honoring it in some shape. And then you see certain insights once in a while come about. And then you sit with your friends, and there's this wonderful conversation, and all of a sudden you open your mouth and you begin to talk. And then something overcomes you. You say to your friends, I'll be right back. You go to the bathroom, and your eyes are a little teary, and you have no idea what just happened. It's you said a couple of things, and you feel as if you were standing outside listening to yourself, and it wasn't coming from you. It wasn't even yours, and yet it came through you. It's kind of like what Native American art, that make this art, but know that you are a vehicle to the spirits up there. Which means that the moment you finish the art, you don't autograph it. You don't put your name down. You don't sign it because it's not yours. And it's a difficult place. I mean, it's a difficult activity, reflection. Because it has solitude in it, it has meditation in it, it has also despair in it. The moment you say, I want to reflect, it means that you've read enough books, you've engaged with enough people to realize, at least to have come to realize that no one out there, books included, Jesus included, no one can give you wisdom. I mean, I think there is something profoundly wise about the betrayal of his 12 disciples. And it should tell all of us something about education. That the only thing that a good teacher like Jesus, like the Buddha, like Muhammad, like anyone out there who teaches anything that has any value, that all they really can do is plant seeds. And how does the seed, for example, like someone like Peter, how does the seed come to fruition? How does it blossom? Well, Peter thinks he knows. Peter thinks he's never going to doubt. Peter thinks he has reached certitude. And then like Job, he is touched. And very much like Job, he falls apart. And then there comes a point where he lives in the world of Caesar and betrays the world of God. He walks away from God and goes to Caesar. That's his life, that's his flesh, that's his fantasies, dreams, hopes. And there comes a point where he understands what he's done. Now, just because you understand, it doesn't mean that you can go back and fix things. Understanding always brings about a good amount of despair. And despair is a place of complete helplessness, you know. And you either take Advil, or if the stories in the Gospels are true, you kind of bang your head against the wall and say, help me, you know. And when you say help me, it means that I've listened to Jesus. I can't remember exactly what he said. Good morning. And even if I remember the things he said, I don't really understand. I don't even really understand their application. I just need help. And that's your solitude, that's your meditation, that's your cave, that's your darkness, that's your depression. And then you sit in it for a while. And then all of a sudden, near the end of the Gospel of Mark, that has the last 12 verses, which was, the last 12 verses were added much later on than the original version of Mark. You find the image of Peter being so profoundly calm and so anchored, and now he has reached certitude. You know, it doesn't say what he understood. It doesn't say the process that he went through to understand what he understood. All we have are these snippets, these paragraphs or sentences that tell us, well, he was an idiot, he became a wise man. And then the rest of us in this class have to kind of look at the book and say, okay, well, you know, from being an idiot to wisdom, there is this gap. What's inside this gap? And then you have thousands of people in the past, like 5,000 years, writing books, telling the rest of us what this gap is.
Siddhartha comes to mind.
Going back to, forgive me for repeating this again and again and again, it's always better for you to be broken by someone. I'm not talking about like a romantic relationship. You know, if you happen to have found the Buddha, for example, somewhere, he will break your life. Your marriage will, it's not going to fall apart physically, but the sort of attachments you will have to your companion will not be as intense. The sort of attachments you will have to your children will not be as intense. Your care and love and passion will be completely different. And you want to go back to the person that you once were, but that's not possible because now the Buddha has kind of planted some seeds inside you and he's protected them. But you want to be like him, but you can't. You want to go back to the person you were, but you can't. And you say, well, you broke me, you got to fix me. And the truth is, he can't fix you. All he can do is just tell you, you know what? This is my ashram, or this is my church. Come there, sit. You want to ask questions, fine. If you've reached a place where you want to be in complete silence, that's fine too. Just come there, sit, see the people, look at me, feel, you know, this wonderful building, and then go home. And then once you reach home, you find yourself being completely homeless, being alone, despite having a wife or a husband and you know, 10, 15, 20 kids. And then after 20 years, you realize, oh my God, you know, I walk the streets, I see something, and I can actually process it really, really well. And in fact, when I go to listen to the Buddha's sermon, he says something, I say, wait a minute, no, that's actually not true. And now you begin to object, silently, of course, as a way of respecting your teacher, that what the Buddha is saying is half true and half false. You know, if you allow life to break you, it's tough. It's tough to get fixed. You know, unless you have a culture that has created this wonderful historical, psychological, physical narrative. You know, I don't know if any of you in this class have read the Old Testament. Not entirety, because mostly it's rubbish, but one of the nice things about the Old Testament is, in some ways, it's the history of the Jews. And these poor folks, they've never really had a stable physical life. They've always been pushed around, always. But what you have, a wonderful philosophy of escapism, which is there isn't much else you can do. You can't, fight life, it's far too big. What you do is you create this fantastic philosophy that you say, you know what, we are the chosen people of God. And very much like Job, who couldn't see the reason for his suffering initially, ultimately he came to understand the reason for his suffering. And why did Job suffer? Because God favored him. God found Job to be profoundly unique and special amongst all people out there. God didn't put his fingers on Jack or Jim or Job, but only Job. So why is it that only the Jews are going through difficulties? It's because God loves them. Which means that after all the suffering, there's going to be a point where they're going to look at their life, themselves, they'll come in and say, we have finally reached the promised land. If your culture has that, then whatever difficulties befall you, there's a way you can fix it. It's by going back to your religious or philosophical tradition. And it's good, it's great. You know, it's something that David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, talked about. All right, fine. Let's get rid of religion altogether. But what are you going to replace it with? Psychology? Therapy? You know, sure, religion is bad. Okay. Who was that guy? He had divorced at the age of 87. He was an actor on the sitcom in the 19s. Who? No, Hugh Hefner was not an actor. He acted in a different way, but
Guy from The Odd Couple.
maybe one of those.
Kid of like
Yeah, you know, you divorced at the age of 90, and then you sit back, or I sit back, and I say, well, you know, at the age of 90, well, you know, you're ugly, your body's falling apart. Who's gonna like walk you to Kaiser? Who's gonna like bathe you? Who's gonna clean you? What the hell is wrong with you? I'm sorry? Wisdom from the left side of the room. Yeah. Anyway, so let me just say one last thing about seclusion, solitude, and meditation, and then we'll move on. When you're a young student and you have all these big questions to which there are no answers, and you realize that these big questions have been planted inside you by this other person, in my case, Hussein. When I wasn't with him, when I wasn't at his house, when I wasn't with my friends, only two other people, you would always feel restless and in despair. But the moment you would walk into his house, the moment you would drive up to the car wash, all of a sudden this calm came over you. And that's the best sort of solitude and meditation you will ever experience in your life. Because there is a living, quacking anchor, you know, that despite the waves and despite the wind and the storm and the hurricane, it is true that this big ship is, you know, going back and forth, but the truth is, it's not going to go back and forth, you know, too far in great distance. And that's what Hussein did for us. And that's the best kind of meditation and the best kind of solitude you can ever find. It's not going to last very long. You know, like everything else, all relationships live in space and time. Space, geography, and time being just, you know, seconds ticking by. And as the encounter becomes more and more frequent, then after a while you just lose interest, or just life gets in the way. So if there is an opening for any of you, you should take advantage. You know, if you've read a book that inspires you, keep reading it. If you go to a church and the pastor gives you a great sermon, just keep attending that church. Yeah,
so like, when I read Anne Frank when I was 12.
Okay.
And that book really inspired me to start reflecting and writing diaries. Because reading her book helped me not feel so bad about the situation that I was in. And then I was like, well, eventually one day if I could write something that could help others, not be so cynical and depressed, because there could be hope, because she was in a terrible situation, but she never lost hope, even though she did eventually end up dying. But like, she never lost hope in her diary. She'd always hope for hope. And hope kept her alive for as long as she could, right? But she ended up writing something that ended up inspiring the world.
Sure.
Right? So if you could look at reflection and the type of way you could write something, and even though you yourself as a writer might not appreciate it because you're cynical, but others might read it one day and might get inspired, and you might be helping.
It's very true.
You could look at it at a different way.
Absolutely. You're absolutely true. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But the writings of, usually when you read a book, you're talking about the conclusion that a human being has reached. You know, I'm writing this thing on Rumi, the first 40 lines, and I'm still stuck on the first line, and it's about 200 pages. Just the first line. Let's just say the book is published, and let's say you buy it. What are you reading? You're reading about 20 years of my work, but you don't see the 20 years. All you see is the conclusion.
I
You're,
can see this 20 years, I read your biography.
no, you don't
Bio,
understand.
your-
No, no.
Your forwards,
Look,
your prologue. I read them sometimes. So I do.
you are reading a conclusion reached by another human being's struggle and efforts to understand. You're a consumer. You're not a worker.
I'm a very literate person. I read over 300 books, so I would appreciate your work.
How do you cross from that to the next instead of just taking it out? I mean, obviously you just have to sit and think with it, but is there a way to do it? I guess just practice.